Oh, hello, Bob. Good to see you.
Hello, everybody. Is my audio coming through okay?
Oh, we're not,
Check. Test.
I hear you fine. You able to-
So we can hear you, Bob.
iPhone.
Bob, your connection seems a little bit poor. Can you speak a couple sentences into the microphone?
Three. Able to hear me?
Yeah, it sounds.
Well,
You're kind of chopped. You're kind of chopping off a little bit.
well,
Bob, can you try to call into the meeting too?
Sure. hold on a second. this any better?
Say a couple more sentences.
1, 2, 3. Is this any better? Or not?
Yeah, we can hear you, but it's still choppy. It's certainly still choppy.
Well, I'm trying to make a.
Yeah, I don't think it comes out good enough. Kind of, we cannot understand you.
Recording in progress.
Let's see if that works better. Let's see if that works better. That works good. That works good. That works good.
Yeah, then I would say let's probably elect, like, for the meeting, let's elect a different chairman to run the meeting tonight. And then we'll see if Bob can join at a later time as a member. Yes, we still have quorum. We have like the 4 people here. You all can run the meeting. Yeah, we would. Yeah, you all would vote on a chairman for this meeting. And let's do that before we start the meeting officially. Let me quickly. Can you take it? Let me pause this point.
Do you want to bring the meeting to order?
All right, if everyone's ready, then I guess we'll go ahead and start tonight's meeting. We'll start off, if all the commissioners who are present could introduce themselves. We'll start on this side.
Erica Harris.
I'm Rob Price.
Ed Wagner.
Jared Abram.
And has Bob rejoined us?
He is not. He would, they're working on it. So
Okay.
if you all could elect a chairperson from the room.
All right. So our first order of business, I guess, is to get ourselves a chairperson.
I'll make a motion to appoint Rob Price as tonight's chairperson for the meeting.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? Why am I'm already acting like a chairperson. All in favor? Fine. All opposed? Okay, apparently I'll be running tonight's meeting. And we'll let Bob chime in as he's able with his connection. First order of business is the minutes from the May meeting. If everyone has had a chance to review those, do we have any comments or questions on those? All right, can we get a motion then to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Are there any organizational or procedural items on our agenda tonight? Nope. And we have no unfinished business that I'm aware of. So we'll move on then to new business. We have 2 items related to the Dunwoody Village area. And Paul, I'm guessing we're going to go through these one at a time.
Correct. So I'm prepared to give a presentation, and I'll combine 2 items since they're more or less like interrelated. So I'll do one presentation, but let's take the items one at a time with the vote and so forth.
Go ahead.
Perfect. Well, thank you. So let me share my screen here. All right, good evening, Planning Commission. We have 2 cases tonight, and because they're more or less a continuation of the Dunwoody Village rezoning, I'll give the staff presentation for both items combined. Then let's still go through the items separately as it pertains to public comment and as it pertains to the individual vote. If there's any questions about how to keep them separate, just please do ask me and use me as a resource to allow us to do that successfully tonight. We're talking about the 2 remaining parcels tonight that were excluded at the last minute from the comprehensive rezoning for the Dunwoody Village. That was before you last year. At some point, it was finally approved in November of last year by the City Council. These 2 parcels, and that's 5500 Chambly Dunwoody, the shops of Dunwoody, that includes the Night Thai restaurant, Dunwoody Tavern, Taqueria Los Hermanos, and other businesses. And then the smaller parcel to the north at 1244 Dunwoody Village Parkway, and that's the Sunshine Car Wash. So it's for those 2 parcels. And they are both currently still zoned C1, which is our local commercial district, and they are the 2 remaining parcels that are still having the Dunwoody Village Overlay District, which was at the time those regulations that had some urban design specifications, and that included the Williamsburg design language. So those still do apply to these 2 parcels exclusively. And with this rezoning, the Dunwoody Village Overlay District would finally cease to exist. So these 2 parcels were initially sort of an integral part of the rezoning, and at the before City Council, the property owner objected to being included in the rezoning, and the issue at hand was whether the buffer that's currently in place, there's a vegetated buffer between the shopping center and the neighborhood to the west, whether that is a zoning condition at the time. And they objected to having a buffer imposed kind of on their western property boundary. The question was whether that was a zoning buffer or whether it was a private agreement sort of between the developer done in the 1970s and the neighborhood. And we did a fairly involved research about that to find out. And that's to an extent hampered by the quality of the files that we received from DeKalb County. So we don't have complete files to go by. In our opinion, as the staff, in the opinion of the city attorney, there is no zoning condition in place currently under the zoning. So there is a buffer, but the private agreement has expired. There's no zoning condition in place right now, which is why we now negotiated with the property owner and their representatives on finding sort of a middle ground to this, which is what we're proposing to you all tonight. This is a rezoning technically, but there's no project involved. There's no immediate plans to build anything as of the moment, but it is, again, sort of in the spirit of this Dunwoody Village comprehensive rezoning. It is to get the zoning for the future development of the district. Because of the specific nature of the Dunwoody Village regulations, you see 2 separate agenda items before you. The first one is zoning map amendment. That's a city-initiated rezoning. So there's no applicant. It is sort of us as the city staff proposing to change the zoning, to change the color on the map. And there is also a text amendment case, and that's important because the Dunwoody Village District has a regulating map that includes future street network, that includes buffers, that includes mandatory open space. And only with a text amendment, by exchanging the regulating map for a new map that includes these 2 parcels, do those buffer and other regulations apply. They're not part of the regular zoning. And then finally, I've mentioned this, these are the two last remaining parcels with the Dunwoody Village Overlay District. So we're proposing to strike that as of the rezoning of these two remaining parcels because there's no need for it anymore. So what we're proposing now is to rezone the parcel to the Dunwoody Village 4, the Village Center District. It's here in pink. So this is sort of similar in continuation to the central part of the village and to extend that further out west. On the western boundary, we're proposing a 35-foot minimum buffer. And we're proposing an additional 115 feet of mandatory open space. Open space is specifically regulated in the Dunwoody Village regulations. It has to have a certain characteristics, so there wouldn't be any buildings in it. There wouldn't be, so it could have different forms. It could be sort of a more green area. It could be a more plaza area. That's sort of up to any future development. For the moment, the buffer in place wouldn't go anywhere. This is again to address potential future development. And I want to quickly contrast that with sort of our current regulating map and the current zoning that you see on the right-hand side. So it's simply not included in the Dunwoody Village zoning right now. It is zoned with the C1 commercial district. So redevelopment currently under current zoning could be sort of your traditional shopping center. They could build a different shopping center. They could, it could have the same form it has at right now. And then as a second item here, I want to contrast it with what was initially proposed in the 2020 draft. So this was before the property owner objected. This is how we and the consultant thought it out. It would have been split zoning. So like the very eastern portions would have been in the Dunwoody Village 4 district, like the center district. The majority of the parcels would have been in the Dunwoody Village 1, like the village commercial district, which is they're similar in the uses that are allowed. And the Dunwoody Village 4 district is slightly more intense. And I have a chart coming up that shows the difference or the key differences between these two districts. What was important to us and what we're happy that the property owner committed to was to keeping that street network in here, because that's an integral part if the village gets redeveloped, is to get these blocks right and to get the streets right. So we're happy that the property owner was amenable to having that included as part of the regulating map. For the comparison of these two districts, and I can go back and forth between these tables if it comes in handy at a later time. The Dunwoody Village 4, so on the left-hand side, you see what's proposed now. On the right-hand side, you see what was proposed earlier. So the height can be up to 1 story more. The maximum impervious cover is 10 percentage points more. And there's a mandatory mixed use component. So it has to have either like a commercial and a residential component or a commercial and an institutional component. So 2 different use categories have to be mixed under the proposed requirements. So it is the more intense zoning district, but there is that trade-off of maintaining the first 150 feet on the western side and sort of shifting the bulk of the development closer to the center of the district. For the buffer comparison, I have 2 numbers here included. On the left-hand side, what is proposed now, which is like 35-foot undisturbed buffer immediately adjacent to the residential properties. So it would be a 35-foot buffer, then the 150-foot required open space. And then immediately adjacent to that is sort of a street proposed. So technically the first buildings that would eventually, potentially in the future be constructed would still remain about 200 feet or over 200 feet away from the residential neighborhood. Under the current zoning, sort of with our legal assumption that the buffer does not exist legally currently, this could be redeveloped with a transition yard of 10 feet. So it's a planted area that functions to an extent like a buffer that's 10 feet immediately to the west of the development. And then the first buildings could really be built within 30 feet of the residential properties, which is the general rear building setback in the C1 district. So again, like this was a sort of negotiated solution to, on the one side, kind of complete the Dunwoody Village zoning process, to not maintain the C1 district or C1 district zone property in there, but to sort of close out the rezoning, finish it at the same time. We had a property owner who objected to the initial proposal. So what this is at this time is sort of a negotiated solution that has the buy-in of us as the staff, and it has the buy-in of the property owner. It's something that is to an extent to you all. It's sort of a proposal that we would ask you to weigh in and to sort of recommend your approval or denial, but it's not something that can be negotiated at the fine details at the moment, because it went through several months of our legal representation and their legal representation. Consider these. We think it's a good compromise proposal that maintains the 150 feet, even if it's not as a undisturbed buffer, but it maintains 150 feet of open space immediately adjacent to the residential districts that currently does not exist on paper. It exists in practice, but not on paper. And so therefore we think it's a good compromise. Then yeah, I'd like to conclude my presentation, and if any questions come up.
Thank you. I believe we go for comment at this point. Has anybody filled out any cards for either side? I think we usually start with people speaking. Yeah.
We start with the people in favor of the
Yeah,
proposal.
so is there anyone who would like to speak in favor? All right, is this his card or? All right, if you could then just introduce yourself and state your name into the microphone, please.
I will. Got a card off the lot as well. My name is Den Webb, 1230 PC Street, Atlanta, Georgia, 30309, here on behalf of the property owners of the two parcels Paul just described. Before I begin, let me introduce in the rear there, Bruce Williams. He is the representative for the two property owners, which are named Peachtree Shops of Dunwoody LLC and SODOC 2 LLC. I'm speaking in support of the staff's application. The two properties Paul mentioned are about 13 acres. And as you saw from the diagram, they're on the west side of Chamblee Dunwoody Road. He talked a little bit about how we got here. I'm going to fill in a few points just to give you some color. This whole issue started about a year ago. There was a question as to whether or not there was a 150-foot buffer on the western property line of my client's properties. There had been a covenant back in 1977 that imposed a buffer, but that covenant only lasted for 20 years. And it was certainly only limited to a private agreement. And as Paul mentioned, the conclusion was universally that there was no zoning condition in place. So that covenant expired in 1997. And from at least our client's perspective, it was out of the picture, and so was the buffer. We, at the time, had not clearly resolved that issue. So we wound up filing a declaratory judgment action in court to try and clear the air on that question, and that matter still pens. The proposal that you have before you tonight is something we've all been working on for months, and as you heard, it's supported by the staff, the city, and my clients. So, ultimately, it is an attempt to allow the city to close out the rezoning and overlay process, but it's also an attempt to settle a lawsuit. to be honest. I mean, that's what ultimately the result will be. So as you heard, the compromise involves 150 feet, 35 feet of undisturbed buffer and 115 additional feet of a green space. So just to put that in perspective, as I mentioned, the site is 13 acres. That 150 feet comprises over 3 acres. So because of this agreement, 23% of the site will be maintained as green space. So I was telling somebody about this earlier. This compromise has sort of the hallmark of a good compromise. It's not exactly what anybody wants, but it's something everybody's willing to live with. And we certainly appreciate the staff's efforts on this matter. I know they worked hard to represent the interest of the property owners to the west and make sure that they were not faced with the risk of having no buffer at all, and that they were able to get the 150 feet that the city originally proposed. So with that, we hope we can move this forward tonight and allow the process to conclude and settle our lawsuit. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor? All right, then I've got one card from Mr. Fasella, Bob Fasella. Sorry, I couldn't read it very well. If you'd like to come on up and I get just state your name and then whatever comments you have.
Yep, Bob Fasella, 4894 Summerford Drive. I am the president of the Dunwoody Homeowners Association, and we are speaking on behalf of the owners of some of the properties on the branches. And basically, we're asking the Planning Commission to defer its recommendation until next month, as it doesn't seem to be any real hurry right now. And because of COVID, the county is still unable to give us access to all of its records from the 1970s, records that we know, after talking to our attorney, we know they're there. We just can't get to them. And so records that should contain the zoning and conditions from the original agreement with the developer. Now, seeing as the current owners of the property don't have a site plan, really don't have any changes for the property plan, there just doesn't really seem to be an urgency not to delay this. Now, like I said, we can't get to the records because of COVID. DeKalb County, we've filed open records requests. They've gone absolutely nowhere. The city has filed them. The city hasn't gotten anywhere with them either. So in the meantime, the DHA is soliciting the help of our county commissioner, Robert Patrick, to see if he has a better means, more pull towards obtaining those records. And we're pretty sure he does. So an extra 30 days doesn't really seem like it's going to really harm anyone. At the end of the day, let's just do the right thing and give our homeowners a chance. Let's see what the records show. The records are there. We just have to get to them. So I appreciate your recommendation or your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition?
I do show someone with a hand raised online. Are you taking online comments still?
Yeah, we'll take comments.
Brian Droftil, I apologize for the way I've said your name, but you should unmute and speak at this time.
Thank you. It's Brian Dodrell, but I get that often. I'm Brian Dodrell, 945 East Paces Ferry Road, Suite 2750, here on behalf of Dunwoody Homeowners Association and a number of the residences along Hidden Branches and Trail Ridge Way. I heard in staff's comments and with respect to staff that this was an agreement that had been worked out with everybody. The biggest issue that we have with that is that everybody didn't include the neighbors and the homeowners association who appeared in opposition to anything other than option 3 back in the fall when the Dunwoody Village overlay was put in place. It isn't completely accurate to say that there is no evidence of this original zoning back in 1977 being a conditional zoning. There have been probably at least 5 rezonings or alterations of conditions, as DeKalb couched them, in the years since 1977. And in each one of those, there are documents referencing the fact that the 77 zoning from R150 to C1 was C1 conditional, that it was conditioned on a site plan. That's recognized even by the current owner's predecessor and title, Mr. Womack, who wrote letters to the county in support of the various applications that he brought, reciting the fact that there was a 150-foot buffer. and documents within the city's possession, documents that the city has produced to me through Open Records Act, show that his original application in 1977 called for it to be conditional and called for it to have 150 to 200 foot buffers adjoining hidden branches and Trail Ridge. Every single letter he wrote in the subsequent years on those properties, he tried to alter various conditions to put a bank in, and then to eventually be some of the other modifications to the uses, still referenced that site plan, still attached that site plan, and still contemplated the fact that there was a 150-foot buffer. I haven't seen a single ordinance that's been produced by DeKalb County yet. I've seen minutes from a number of meetings, but not a single ordinance. And I don't know if that's a function of they haven't been requested, or they've just requested the minutes, or they requested it only through planning, or what. The lawsuit that Mr. Webb just referenced is still pending. Again, homeowners weren't made part of that lawsuit, weren't brought to the table as part of that conversation. But I can tell you this, that lawsuit has been pending for approximately 6 months, and there has not been a single discovery device used that we can identify other than Open Records Act requests. And as y'all may imagine, ORAs are not exactly the most compulsory process that you can use. You could have done requests to produce documents, subpoenas to DeKalb County, all other manner of kind of discovery devices to try to get to this information. And so we are requesting that this matter be continued for at least 30 days for us to be able to get into the process ourselves, because our significant involvement started basically a little over a week ago when we were told this had been negotiated in agreement. We weren't at the table. We didn't get to comment. If this is C1 conditional, the advertisement for the property for the rezoning is incorrect. If it's C1 conditional, the city has said all along, if it's a condition of zoning from the 77 or any of the subsequent rezonings, it would back Dunwoody Homeowners Association and the neighbors play in this, but it can't find an ordinance. And all we're saying is there's no immediate plans to redevelop. There's no reason to put those trees at risk by doing this rezoning. Defer it 30 days. Let us see if we can get into this process and see if we can get this information from DeKalb ourselves. When y'all reviewed this back in the fall of last year, y'all recommended option 3, which was to maintain these buffers. These homes and these homeowners have existed and bought their homes in reliance on those buffers. We have zero problem with it being considered as open space. One of the categories of open space that y'all have under the Dunwoody Village is parks, which contemplates preservation of natural stands of trees. Well, you have a massive stand of natural trees that have been there low these many years. If it's a function of getting to count it for open space, we support that. We would ask that it be limited to parks and that the significant stands of trees be preserved, as well as adherence given to the tree ordinance to save those trees. Yes, we'll be 150 to 200 feet removed from any building, but now that building is going to be taller than the buildings that would have been adjacent to us. And we all know that grassy plaza isn't going to provide the same protection and the same buffering to an existing residential neighborhood that was developed and was planned around this 1977 rezoning. So we would ask that y'all continue this matter, or if y'all do go forward, that y'all reinstate or reinsert the option 3 that y'all had previously recommended.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else that wants to speak on this issue?
I show no other hands raised in the Zoom application.
All right, then we'll go to questions from the commission. Erica, do we want to start with you?
Sure. Just a couple of clarity questions to start with, and then I'm going to listen and probably chime in again. I do want to ask, in regards to residents not being part of the lawsuit, I would assume that's because it was the city being involved, which means that there was probably privileged information in there that could not and would not involve the branch's residents. Is that a fair?
Yeah, that's correct. At this point, the lawsuit was like between property owners, applicant,
And the city.
and it was negotiated with the city's legal representation and the property owners.
Okay. And then can I get a little more information on open space? When we talk open space and I hear plaza, green space, trees, parks, not parking, right? Open space does not mean it could become asphalt space.
Correct. They're like in the code, and that's part of your package, like towards the very end, I think.
Right.
There's specific types that are called out. So it has to be either plaza as defined, the green as defined, the commons, a park.
Right.
And the rooftop terrace wouldn't apply, but like it has to be one of those and then not foreseeing sort of surface parking.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure that was quite clear. The next question I have about covenants, and I'm not sure if you guys can answer this, but it's something I became aware of in the past, just living in a neighborhood that had an HOA. So covenants that were signed in the 1970s have a natural expiration date. And I knew that the state addressed that at some point in the late 1990s, I believe, that for HOAs in particular would roll over HOA covenants. But I'm making an assumption here that the covenants that were signed in, and correct me if I'm wrong on the 1976 date, they were never re-signed. That there was that initial signing and then there was not a re-signing of that, but rather an assumption that they would just roll over and follow the property, or that information didn't pass through the years. Is that?
Yeah, and we don't entirely know kind of why it wasn't continued. It expired, and then to our knowledge, it was not renewed, or there was no action happened that wouldn't have let it expire. And then sort of generally, and I always like to add this, like that we as the city, we tend to just like not look at these private covenants in any form.
Yeah.
We're not enforcing them. And
20 years is a long time. No, I mean, I'm not surprised. Again, it's not uncommon for, I do believe that's why, and I think it was the late 1990s or so, the state went ahead and did an automatic renewal of HOA covenants. But I just wanted to receive clarity on that there was not a re-signing of those original, because that helps me understand the legal side. That's it for me for right now.
Ed?
Mr. Webb, question I have for you guys is, if we were going to delay, what would that impact look like for you if we were going to defer for 30 days?
I think it's just unnecessary at this point. We've been going back and forth, particularly with the neighbors' involvement for well over a year. We have gotten all information we're going to get out of DeKalb County. Our lawsuit includes the minutes from the original 1977 rezoning that does not include a site plan or any kind of buffer condition. I mean, there's nothing left to talk about. As Paul's slide showed, the city attorney and the city have concluded there's no condition. We've concluded it. There's absolutely no evidence of it. And we spent an incredible amount of time and energy to get to this point. I know the city wants to get it behind them, and we do as well. So we've got a pending lawsuit that we'd like to put to bed. And we extended the discovery period out a little bit longer to let this process run its course, but that's about it. So it's unnecessary. It's not going to change anything from my perspective. We've got a deal, we're laying it at your feet, and we hope you'll accept it so we can all move forward.
Okay, but from an impact perspective, it sounds like it's minimal. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I didn't get the answer I think I was looking for.
Well, I mean, you're not going to delay a project. Okay, but it still costs
Correct.
time and energy. I'm gonna have to come back here in a month and speak, and we're gonna have conversations with the city, and they're gonna have to use their time and energy really to just wait 30 days. I've had conversations with Mr. Dodrell in the last couple of days. He'd asked us to consider some things, talk about things we did, and we got back to him and said, no, we've got to deal with the city. We're all happy with it. We're gonna try and move forward with it. So you're not gonna delay a project, but it's not gonna be without any impact. I mean, we're all gonna have to still focus on this thing for another month.
Sure. Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, gentleman in the reddish shirt. I didn't want to say pink, but all right, Bob. Yeah, sorry, man. When did you learn of this? And could you represent the community there? When did you learn of this, and what has your participation been like?
Member of the DHA that really should be here talking about this, and he was unable to make it tonight, is Bill Grossman. Bill is our expert on it. I happen to be the president, and my knowledge of the situation is just not where Bill's is. But, you know, talking with Brian, our attorney, I don't know if he's still available. Brian can speak to this better than I can, but a 30-day deferral, I just learned a lot about this in the past couple of days. I don't understand, you know, I'm sorry, we're going to make Mr. Webb work another 30 days. I apologize for that. But I think the homeowners should get a chance, and we should get the opportunity to speak with the county commissioner who will dig into these records and get us somewhere where we haven't been. The city really hasn't, except for filing some open records requests, really hasn't done a whole lot more than that with DeKalb County trying to dig up these records. I'm told that these records are there. They'll be findable. I don't really understand why an extra 30 days will hurt anyone. Excuse me? Brian, our attorney. He said the open records request either from the city or from the DHA itself, from our attorney, he's made those requests, you know, they fall on deaf ears and they really don't go anywhere in this COVID times. And we feel that getting our county commissioner involved will go a long way. You know, maybe it doesn't at the end of the day, but I don't really see where 30 days makes a whole heck of a lot of difference.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Appreciate it.
That's all for me.
Jared, do you have anything?
Yeah, and maybe a question for Mr. Webb or Paul, whomever wants to answer this, but can somebody tell me what the major difference is between the 1977 proposal was that we're trying to find and then the one today? Is it 250 feet to 150? Is that?
So there was a buffer, and the buffer was constructed. So we have that buffer that was contemplated as part of the construction. It was 150 feet to up to, I want to say, 200 feet. So it's the buffer that's in place right now that was contemplated as part of that proposal. The question is whether that was sort of a zoning condition or a private agreement between the two parties.
Okay. So, but regardless of that, sounds like all parties have come to an agreement, correct? Or have they not?
Which parties are you referencing to?
I mean, you said that, you know, so with this new proposal here is because you said that the city of Dunwoody and the residents are now in agreement. So your
No,
recommendation.
I'm not speaking between the city of Dunwoody and the residents. I wouldn't I wouldn't say that. It's sort of we as like the city staff and the city attorney, we are in agreement with the property owner and their representation.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the property owner that owns the two parcels.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. I had a question for Mr. Webb. So let's say, just out of curiosity, I know this is a long time coming in the future and no one knows exactly what's going to get built here at some point. But let's say that, you know, they find these 1977, you know, proposal documents, whatever it is, and that takes precedent. How will that affect, you know, your guys' planning and, you know, the designs that we had before about building a potential road back there and doing all that, if you're aware of that?
They're not going to find it. We've been dealing with DeKalb County. We've gotten responses to our open record act requests throughout this entire COVID time. So it is doable. And I believe the city has as well, but it's not going to change anything. I mean, this is going to supersede all of it. So the roads that you saw on that plan, the buffer and the green space area you saw on the plan will all be there. And really, it's not that different from what was contemplated back in 1977. They were talking about a basically 150-foot buffer off the western property line. And we're talking about a 150-foot green space area that includes a 35-foot undisturbed buffer. So, you know, we're basically agreeing to what, you know, in general was contemplated back in 1977 and doing more by still putting in those roads and things that will help improve, you know, transportation in the village.
Okay. Because I'm trying to figure out what exactly is, you know, what the homeowners are upset about. It sounds like it's very similar, like you just said, but is it, you know, is it another 50 feet, or are they worried about the road, or, you know, what?
I don't know. So the road is outside of the 150 feet. So as Paul mentioned, it's 150 feet of open space plus 62 feet of right of way. At this point, I don't know. I think in the beginning, we were talking about no buffer. And I could understand why they might have an objection there. They wanted the 150 feet that was referenced in 1977, but at this point, I'm not sure. I think the only difference is that we have at least the option of taking some trees down in the 115 feet. That's really the only way it's different than what arguably was there.
And at this plan that you guys in the city came up with, does that fit into your future plans of development, or does that still kind of impede it somewhat?
Well, there is no hard plan for development.
Right.
I think it seems manageable, right? So you've got open space requirements under the village overlay. And if we can apply that property in the rear to meet those requirements, then it gives a lot of flexibility. And as Paul mentioned, the best thing about it is it moves most of the density and height and intensity toward Chamblee Dunwoody and away from the branches. So, it seems workable. I guess proof will be in the pudding when somebody shows up with a site plan, but we've had an engineer look at it, and the blocks that you saw and the right-of-way widths and the separation were all contemplated with the development in mind, and we think it'll work.
Okay. Let's see here. That's all I have for right now.
Chairman Price, can you hear me?
Is this Bob Dallas that's talking?
It is. I don't know if my video's on. I don't see anybody other than planning commission names without faces.
Yeah, your video is not on, but we can hear you.
Okay.
Do you have a thought?
If I make a comment and then ask a question, stepping back for a second, the reason the Dunwoody Village Overlay District was revised recently was recognizing that the entire Dunwoody Village pretty much looks the same way it has since the early 70s. So the question is, did people want to have something that is more functional today and tomorrow, akin to what we've seen with some of our neighboring cities throughout the region? And so that resulted in a whole process where we got a lot of citizen input to create what we now look at as a new overlay district. Obviously, as it relates to these two parcels, the owners were concerned, the way it was written, that they would have been impacted. So working with the staff, the owners have come up with what is referred to as a compromise. For years, having sat on the planning commission for years, there always has been recognition of a very significant buffer, 150 feet, and basically an undisturbed buffer. And I would invite you, for any of you who have not gone in the alleyway behind there, to sit back and look at that and ask, is that really useful other than providing 150 feet of undisturbed space? And so anyway, that's kind of the backdrop. We have a plan that has been vetted with a lot of citizens, recognizing, of course, that the people in the branches are the most impacted, and the property owners of the branches that are adjacent to this are ultimately the most impacted. So their voice does matter. So when I look at, where we are today, nothing is in the offing for redevelopment of these two parcels. But the goal is overall for Dunwoody Village to be redeveloped in a way that serves the entire community well, and of course, respects the branches. And so here are the specific questions that I have. Attorney Dragul mentioned that obviously if these are conditions of zoning, then the question comes down to, was the advertising sufficient to satisfy the legal requirements of the advertising, that the conditions of zoning would be affected by what we're doing here? And for that, I don't know if you, Mr. Webb, who is still there, or the staff can answer that question.
So in my mind, it does suffice, was advertised as the C1 district, which it is. Like, we have to advertise the zoning, the districts from which it gets changed to the district. It is changed. And again, our position is that there is no condition associated with it.
Okay. See, and I point out that the negotiations with the DHA, back in the day, I do recall. Specifically, I'm not sure if there's a condition of zoning. I assume Mr. Webb has done his research to figure that out and therefore is representing today that there is none. But, you know, I just point out that if there is a condition of zoning to be found, you know, the advertising would need to be adjusted to avoid any kind of technical defect in the advertising. I think that's probably correct. Not that there's going to be any found. So secondly, the question is, if a deferral is had an additional 30 days, can we anticipate that the DHA, the neighbors with their attorney, Mr. DeRule, would go through the process of trying to find out whether there is anything out there, so that if we were to come back in 30 days, you know, there's something there or there's not, but that's the end of the question. Is that is there work going to be done so that that question can be answered definitively? And I take it Mr. DeRule is not in the room or on the call anymore.
So I guess that's the gentleman that was on the phone call, and Bob, we need to answer that.
Hey, Bob Fasella here. Yeah, that's what Brian has told me. That's what Bill has told me, that, you know, we'll be able to get some answers in the next 30 days. And if not,
well, I mean, from my perspective, I think it's important that you are satisfied that every effort has been made to get you the answer.
no,
I
we're
just
not
say-
satisfied at all.
Right now, you're not, but in 30 days, you will be.
I think we have a better chance of being satisfied. We are talking about DeKalb County. Does DeKalb County ever satisfy any of us? I
Well,
think
I'm not
I've been
here.
here 28 years, Bob. I think you've been here longer. Can you answer that question?
We have a city for that reason, in many respects.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
here's the point on that. The opportunity to get the information, and it may well be you did get nothing more. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, accepting Attorney
Potentially
West.
Yeah, potentially that's
So,
the
Yeah, I
situation.
mean, what I don't want is we may be unsatisfied that DeKalb County may not have the records to satisfy anybody, but that every reasonable effort has been made to try to get those records, so that at least we're satisfied that on this end, reasonable efforts have been made.
Right. Now, and I'm not sure, from what I've been told, those reasonable efforts haven't been made. And except for, you know, filing some open records requests with not much behind them, neither the city hasn't gotten any answers. And unfortunately, at this point in time, the DHA hasn't. And, but we do feel like with the county commissioner pushing us, we'll get some answers. Maybe it won't be the answers we want, but we'll get some answers.
Well, that may be, and I don't want to occupy too much time here, except to say that as attorneys, it's not unusual when litigating against public entities to not only seek discovery, but also to file open records requests, because sometimes the obligations of the open records requests are greater than we get through discovery as attorneys. I just make that observation that, you know, I'm not surprised that you may not get something on either open records request or discovery, because they probably or may not exist. But anyway, that's one observation. I'll close with this point. There's a bigger goal here for Dunwoody Village, and I think collectively, I hope we can all step back and ask that question: what is that goal? And I think it's evidenced in the work that the citizens put forward for the new master plan for Dunwoody Village. So that's just my observation on that. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob. Erica, did you have one more question?
Go ahead and you give your.
Okay. You know, I don't really have much to add. I will say just my observation. I think that the compromise seems pretty good, but I also very much appreciate the need to make sure that citizens have the opportunity to have their voices heard. So I right now I would probably vote to approve this, but before I did that, I would probably vote to give everybody 30 more days to make sure that they have an opportunity to just have their voices heard in this venue. So just my thought, no questions, just an observation.
I would agree with that.
I guess I have a question because I've heard a couple of things. Mr. Fasella says that the city has not received any response to their ORR, yet I hear from Mr. Webb that that they've received responses to the ORR, and I think also indicated that the city had received responses to their ORR. So I'd like clarity on where we are with those open record requests. Did we ask them and get responses and just get told they couldn't find anything, or what is the answer there?
So staff filed an original open records request with the county. They researched it. They came back and said, you all have everything. Then our attorneys then filed an open records request with DeKalb County, and they came back and said, you have everything. So that's what we have gotten.
Can you define everything? You have everything as in everything we passed to you in the past, you have all records, and we have nothing more to give you. That's
Correct.
what you mean by that statement?
Yes.
All right, so I guess we have two items before us then. We'll look at the first one first, which is the rezoning from C1 to D4. Does anyone have a motion for this?
Now, I mean, I'm torn on this. I'm torn on this because while I hear the residents want more time to hunt down information from DeKalb County, we've got two bodies saying that there is no discovery to be made. And so that is, you have to take that information and two individual entities saying the same thing, it makes you curious, like, you know, is that the case? I do recognize, and I agree with you, Commissioner Price, about the idea of wanting to make sure that the homeowners have an opportunity to follow up and pursue methods. Simultaneously, there's a cost to this as well, I think, to the city, and certainly to the property owners, as you know, in terms of the legal action that they're engaged with. And we don't know the details of that. I'd like to think 30 more days isn't that big of a deal. Yes, everyone will have to come back. But I think to your point earlier, you know, are we coming back to satisfy one last dig and to make it a 3 out of 3 people saying the same thing? Or are we satisfied enough to call this a day? I personally like the compromise. I think that Commissioner Abrams, to your point, where we're talking about trees. So it's pretty much the same space, 115 undisturbed versus 150 undisturbed, but it's not 115 undisturbed. It's 30 feet undisturbed where it used to be 150 undisturbed. And we have 115 feet now of open space, which will most likely be green, park, plaza, something along that lines, which with the road being there, in my design, I think could be very beneficial to future development. When you're having folks be able to go on that back line, it allows for ice cream shops and kids playing on the green space behind it. So this is as much discovery as it is, I think what Commissioner Dallas was saying is, what's the vision? What do we want at the end of this? So I'm trying to figure out what we're talking about here a little bit, which has me confuddled, if that's a word.
My thought is we have, I guess, two questions for each motion. One is are we voting on it tonight or deferring it? And if we're voting on it tonight, you know, and the language of the motion will determine in what way we're voting on it and what we're voting on. So that's the question before us.
Yeah, so for me, I'm all for the greater good. We did this with the community a year and a half ago. The community is looking for the vision that we set forth in the the district, the village overlay. That's the vision. I'm for getting there. However, I want the community to be heard and give them the 30 more days. And then from there, it's to what the community voted for a year and a half ago.
I'll just echo all those sentiments real quick. Exactly. To me, the end goal is what we're trying to get to here, which is, revamping the Dunwoody Village that's been the same way since the 1970s. I wanted to hear about if the new proposal was enough space for the developer to build what we all want to see. He said, I guess it is, but we're not here to talk about the details of that. So if they're okay with it and they can build what we all think is going to be a great village, then, I would vote right now as well to approve this. However, I mean, with the people, if Bob and the DHA and the residents next to him feel that they need 30 more days to figure it out, I mean, I just don't want anybody to say, oh, we never had a shot, we never had our 30 days. I don't think we need to hear any of that. So again, I would approve as well right now, but I'm open to waiting 30 days as well to give these guys some time to see if they can find these documents.
So if someone would like to make a motion, in either direction, we'll discuss.
I'll make a motion to defer item F1 RZ 2101 for 30 days.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All right, discussion. We'll start, since we started here last time. Anything else you'd like to add, Commissioner Abram?
Let me say, I don't think I can vote because I'm not there, given the change in the rules, but I'm supportive for the reasons that you all just stated.
Thank you.
Could you all specifically state the date? You want to delay it till August meeting, it's August 10th.
Sure. So you want me to amend that? Okay. Amending my original motion to defer F1 RZ 21-01 to the August 10th meeting.
I second that.
All right. So we just heard from Commissioner Dallas. Does anyone else have any comments on the motion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of deferring item F1, rezoning from C1 to D4 until the August 10th meeting, please signify by raising your hand. Any opposed? All right, we'll be deferring item 1. So we'll move on then to item number 2, which is the revisions to the text amendment that also apply to this parcel. Does anyone have a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion to defer item F2, review and consideration of text amendments to amend the Dunwoody Village.
You're breaking up, Bob.
Yeah, I think you have to allow for comments for and against. Technically, you have to allow for comments for and against, I think, on this item,
Oh,
because it's a separate item. If
a
they may not be
motion
necessary, I'm inviting nobody, but just making the opportunity.
yeah.
It's
Thank
completely
you.
the public comments, like for and against.
So motion withdrawn.
All right, sorry, we'll now, if anyone has any comments on the text amendments, we'll start off with anyone who would like to speak in favor of this item.
Den Webb, 1230 Peach Street, Atlanta, Georgia, 30309, here on behalf of the owners of Shops at Dunwoody. My client just mentioned something to me that I had forgotten about. You were asking about impacts. There's a moratorium in place. And that is certainly an impact. We're delaying that an additional 30 days. And that has already impacted one of the restaurants in there that I think we were able to work something out ultimately, but there are other impacts too. And I want to mention that. And with that, I will incorporate my previous comments into this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this?
I do have a hand raised online.
All right,
Okay, you should be able to unmute and speak at this time.
Good evening, Brian Dodrell again on behalf of Dunwoody Homeowners Association, the residents along Hidden Branch. Obviously, we favor a deferral, incorporate my previous statements to the August 10th matter. I do want to read to you real quickly one thing, and this is the minutes from 1977. Recommendation, Planning Department approval as conditioned, Planning Commission approval as conditioned. Motion made by Commissioner Manning, seconded by Commissioner Leviton, and unanimously passed to approve the application as conditioned. And when you look at the application that was actually filed, they check a box that says 150 to 200 foot buffer adjoining hidden branches per site plan, 10-foot buffer variance at southernmost drive per site plan. Those are conditions that Mr. Womack proposed to DeKalb County, and they conditioned the 1977 rezoning on it. The minutes reflect that it was conditioned. And so we respectfully ask that you defer this as well. We'll spend the next 30 days both meeting with or talking with Dan if he's willing to talk with us, and working on getting the documents that no one else has found yet.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition? Okay, seeing none, so to follow our normal motion or our normal route, we'll then go to questions and discussion from the commissioners, and we'll start to my left here.
Sure. To the last speaker or note, so Mr. Dodrell, if you're still listening, if there is a way to, and Richard and Paul, to get that information that those homeowners are working with so that the Planning Commission can read that before the next meeting, that would be helpful. And that's all I've got on that.
No comments.
All right, Jared, anything? All right, Bob Dallas, do you have any comment or a question?
No, no, thank you. I appreciate everything that's been said so far.
All right, then the commissioners, what is our pleasure on this? Does anyone have a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to defer item F2. Do I have to read the whole thing? Item F2, review and consideration of text amendments to amend the Dunwoody Village regulating map and to delete the regulations for the Dunwoody Village Overlay District to the August 10th meeting.
Do we have a second on this
I'll
motion?
second that.
All right, any discussion? All right, I don't see any discussion. So we have before us a motion to defer item F2 until the August 10th meeting. All those in favor of the deferral, please raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, that motion passes. So we will be revisiting both of these next month.
And just to note, I can't vote, but I'm supportive of the motion.
Thank you. We move on then in our agenda. Other business. Do we have any other business before the commission tonight? All right. We then move to open public comment. Does anyone have any comments from the public or from those online that they want to share? All right. The next item then is,
I do see one hand raised now online to speak.
okay.
Mr. Bill Grossman, you should be able to unmute and speak at this time.
Thank you. I just want to thank the Planning Commission for deferring this to allow us time to try to retrieve the documents that should have been in our possession a year ago from DeKalb County. Thank you.
All right. Any other public comments? All right. We'll then move to commissioner comments, and we'll start off with Commissioner Abel.
No real comments at this time. Maybe just to give some solace to the folks that live in the branches. So I live in Village Mill, and I've mentioned this before, but when they were putting in the Heritage of Dunwoody neighborhood behind our neighborhood, they had a 48-foot buffer, and everyone was up in arms, and we met with the developers and we yelled at them, and they actually got up and left the room. We were asking them questions, and the developers left the room because they were just getting peppered with questions. I'm the one that's right there on the buffer line. It's 48 feet, and there is a huge monstrosity of a house, behind my house. But the 48 feet is pretty good. I can barely see their house, and they have a huge pool, parties, music, and I can honestly barely see them in the wintertime when there's no leaves you can see through. But it's, you know, I would think 100 feet would be great, 150, you know, but the one thing to just keep in mind that I would recommend is that, you know, at least from what I understand is that all of Dunwoody, most of Dunwoody wants to see something change with the village. And I think that we need to give them as much leeway as possible to make that happen. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's why I asked the developer, you know, how much is, you know, can they make happen what they want to make happen with that, you know, 150 feet that they've kind of, you know, came to negotiate. If they said, okay, then I'm fine with it. So I think, you know, just my 2 cents. I mean, I think 150 feet would probably be great. I would maybe recommend going and looking how far that actually is, you know, just to get a sense of, you know, it in real time. So that's just my 2 cents.
All right, so I would say that, you know, year and a half ago, we set forth to create the new, you know, Dunwoody Village overlay. That's the vision for the city there. So whatever we can do to make that work, I'm in favor for, because we had a lot of community input there. The community wanted that. So I'm looking forward to that happening.
Thank you. All right. Bob Dallas, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I just want to say thank you to you all, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for taking over.
All right, I do have one thing to add. I would just like to make a note that it's Commissioner Abrams' last Planning Commission meeting. His term actually ended last month and he extended it by 1 month so that we would have a quorum for tonight's meeting. So I want to say thank you very much for sticking around an extra month, and thank you very much for all of the work and help you've given us on the commission during the last several years.
Well, it was a buzz.
I really appreciate that. And, you know, and I will say this, I saw Lynn, you know, at Brook Run, and she chased me down. She said, hey, I need you for one more meeting because this was, you know, we were going over something that we had gone over in the past. So chances are I might need to come back.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go.
August, I don't know. So
Yeah, I don't believe we have a replacement identified yet, so there'll still be a seat for you.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. And again, you know, on these kinds of things, I mean, the reason that we're all here is because, you know, there's, you know, trying to negotiate both sides here. So at least we have this process, and it's great. You know, we can't please everyone all the time, you know, as they say, but hopefully we can somewhat get it as close to right as possible. So thank you, Robert.
So if there are no other comments, then I will call for the meeting to be adjourned, and thank you all very much for your time and your feedback tonight.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.